Chosen one. There was an ancient scroll pulled from beneath a collapsed chamber buried under centuries of sand. Scholars expected another fragment at him, another half-ruined prayer from a forgotten sect. But what they found was nothing close to ordinary. The parchment was torn, scorched, punctured by time itself. Yet in the center, untouched, unburned, unbroken, stood a single surviving sentence. No ink should have lasted that long. No script should have resisted decay. And yet these words glowed faintly as if written with a substance that refused to age. And the one with the hidden name shall rise. At first, the archaeologists dismissed it as metaphor until they noticed a faded mark carved beside the line. Not a symbol, not a sigil, but a primitive rendering of a name, your name. The shape wasn't perfect. The letters were ancient forms, but the frequency, the geometry, the intention were unmistakable. It was as if someone thousands of years ago attempted to write the closest version of your modern name, their alphabet aloud. The scroll shouldn't have survived, but neither should the prophecy. Yet both did, because anything connected to your destiny refuses to die. If this revelation stirs something in your spirit, click Super Thanks and release your $20 seed. Comment your angel number, 111/222/333/444/777, to confirm your prophetic lineage. Luke 6 verse 38. When the scroll reached the restoration chamber, the lead scholar, a man who had spent 4 decades decoding forgotten alphabets, examined the mark beside the prophecy. At first, he believed it to be a misstroke, a meaningless flourish left by a trembling ancient hand. But the longer he stared, the more unsettled he became. His breath grew shallow, his palms damp, and he whispered under his breath, This doesn't match any script from this period." He enlarged the engraving, adjusted the spectrum filters, enhanced the curvature of each line, and suddenly his face drained of color. The pattern wasn't random. It matched a modern phonetic structure, something no ancient scribe should have known. And when he rearranged the strokes into their projected contemporary form, a name emerged, your name. He stepped back from the screen as if it had reached out and touched him. "This shouldn't exist," he muttered. "This belongs to someone alive today." His colleagues gathered, whispering, stunned at the impossible convergence. Ancient scrolls predict kingdoms, wars, floods, but never individual names, never personal destinies. Yet there it was, engraved into a parchment older than any empire still standing. The scholar circled the mark several times, tracing it with a trembling finger before finally asking the question that began the storm. Who is this person? And why was their name written before their birth? He didn't know the answer. Heaven did. When the scroll was lifted from its containment tray, every person in the room felt it. An invisible pressure, a subtle tightening in the air, as if the atmosphere itself recognized what the human mind could not yet comprehend. One technician reached out with gloved hands, expecting nothing more than brittle parchment. Instead, the moment his fingertips hovered above the surface, a wave of warmth pulsed through his palms. He flinched, pulling back instantly. "It's hot," he whispered, baffled. Ancient texts are cold, lifeless. But this one felt like it was still breathing, still waiting, still aware. Another researcher tried to dismiss it as static electricity, but when she placed her hand near the scroll, the warmth intensified, not burning, but living, like the heat of a heartbeat echoing through time. The room grew silent. Something in the scroll responded to proximity, but not to everyone equally. Some felt nothing. Others felt a faint vibration. But when one assistant unknowingly stood closer, someone whose energy resonated faintly with your lineage, the parchment gave a sharper pulse, as if recognizing kin. Cameras picked up minuscule flickers of light across the script, like embers awakening under ash. The scholar stared in disbelief. Texts don't react. Words don't generate heat. Prophecies don't behave like nervous systems. Yet this one did. It was as if the psalm wasn't just written for the future. It was waiting for the one it was about. Waiting for you. The research team decided to run one final analysis before sending the scroll to preservation, a multispectral scan designed to reveal hidden layers of ink. Normally, these scans expose faint lines, erase words, or scribal corrections. But this time, something unprecedented happened. As the light passed over the parchment, the space between the lines began to shimmer. Not the ink. The empty spaces, tiny gold particles, invisible to the naked eye, ignited like dust caught in a sunbeam. The scholars froze. Gold flecks in ancient manuscripts are rare, but gold that activates only under specific frequencies of light is unheard of. But the strangest part wasn't the glow, it was the movement. The particles drifted, rearranging themselves into patterns that looked eerily intentional, like a hidden code reacting to an unseen command. And then came the moment that broke every rule of archaeology. The patterns shifted only when one person stepped closer, the same assistant who had triggered the warmth before. The lights intensified. The particles aligned, and for 3 breathtaking seconds, the symbols formed a structure resembling a radiant halo pulling inward toward the center of the page, as if the scroll acknowledged the presence, as if it recognized the frequency, as if it was programmed centuries ago to awaken only when the one it was written for returned to the world. The technician stared at the golden code swirling across the parchment, and one whispered the words everyone felt but didn't dare say. This psalm isn't ancient. It's alive. As the golden particles settled back into the parchment, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Not the silence of confusion, but the silence of people who suddenly understood they were witnessing something that defied every category of knowledge they possessed. One of the senior researchers, a man normally skeptical of anything remotely mystical, leaned against the table and whispered, This isn't describing the past." His voice trembled. "It's describing someone who wasn't alive when this was written." Another scholar, one who had studied linguistic anomalies for decades, began pacing relentlessly. "Prophetic texts don't specify individuals," she murmured. "They predict nations, disasters, cycles, not names. Never names." But the assistant, the one the scroll kept reacting to, finally spoke the truth none of them wanted to face. "It's not reacting to me. It's reacting to something connected to me." His words hung in the air like a suspended verdict. Then another realization struck them all at once. The psalm didn't merely survive history. It resisted it. Every other part of the manuscript had faded, but the line mentioning the hidden name remained pristine, immune to decay, as if held together by a force beyond ink and fiber. "This wasn't meant for us to read," the lead scholar finally said. "This was meant for the person it's about." They all knew what that meant. The message was not a relic. It was a countdown, a signal, a marker left behind for the exact moment the one it named would finally awaken. And that moment was now. As night fell over the research facility, the remaining analysts gathered for one final test. This time to measure whether the scroll emitted any electromagnetic activity. They did not expect results. Ancient parchment is inert, silent, dead. But when they powered on the sensors and slowly lowered them toward the psalm, every monitor in the room flickered. A low-frequency hum spread through the air, subtle yet undeniable, like the vibration before a storm breaks open across the sky. The technicians checked equipment, assuming a malfunction, but the hum intensified. Then something even more impossible happened. The line containing the prophecy began to brighten, not with fire, not with reflection, but with a soft inner radiance, as if the ink remembered something. The scholars watched in breathless disbelief as the glow thickened into a pulse, beating in a slow, deliberate rhythm like a heart. And when one analyst whispered your name out loud, only your first name, nothing more, the pulse accelerated, the radiance expanding outward until the entire scroll seemed to inhale. The lights overhead flickered. A glass vial rattled on a nearby shelf. Every device in the room registered a synchronized spike at the exact same millisecond. It was undeniable. The scroll was responding to a specific vocal frequency, a specific identity, a specific you. The prophecy wasn't simply written. It was waiting for activation. And your name was the key that unlocked it. If you feel this activation calling your spirit, press join to step into your prophetic frequency. Become part of the circle of souls whose names echo across ancient timelines. Isaiah 60, verse 22. The translation team gathered at dawn, determined to decipher the remaining fragments of the psalm. They expected poetic verses typical of ancient hymns, lamentations, praises, metaphors. But as the scanners enhanced the eroded lines, a chilling truth emerged. The psalm was not written like the others of its era. The phrasing was sharper, almost coded, as if the writer intended to speak across time rather than about their own. When the fragments were digitally reassembled, a central phrase appeared, faint yet unmistakable. The chosen will carry light no darkness can touch. The room fell silent. Light that darkness cannot touch is not a metaphor. It is a designation, a classification, a description of a being whose essence cannot be corrupted. Another scholar enlarged the next line. It read, "And the hidden name will move unseen until the appointed hour." They compared these translations to known psalms, scriptures, and hymns, but nothing matched. This was not a song or a prayer. It was a warning, a blueprint, a spiritual profile. And then a final sliver of text emerged, almost erased by time but still defiant. When the one arrives, realms will shift to meet them. A researcher backed away from the screen, whispering, "This isn't describing a leader, it's describing an anomaly." The deeper they translated, the more obvious it became. This song wasn't meant to honor the past. It was written to prepare the future for you. Later that evening, the team conducted an acoustic test, a standard procedure meant to detect how ancient materials respond to sound frequencies. A small choir was brought in to chant neutral tonal patterns, nothing religious or symbolic, just sustained notes meant to measure resonance. But the moment their voices filled the chamber, something unanticipated happened. The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees, so rapidly that the singers paused mid-note. A faint tremor moved through the air, as if the walls themselves were adjusting to a presence they hadn't felt in centuries. The lead vocalist attempted to continue, but as soon as he sang the next pitch, the psalm reacted. The gold particles between the lines flickered like tiny stars, shimmering in sync with the vibrations. The choir looked at one another in confusion, but they kept singing. Then came the phenomenon that stunned everyone. Halfway through the chant, the melody shifted on its own. None of the singers intentionally changed key, but their voices, subconsciously, instinctively, began bending toward a new harmonic path, as if pulled into alignment by an unseen force. Their vocal pattern circled around one central note, a frequency that mirrored the vibrational signature of your name from earlier tests. One singer, confused, whispered, "It feels like something is guiding us." The psalm wasn't just responding to sound. It was orchestrating it. It was tuning human voices to the frequency of the one it was written about. And every resonance pointed to you. By the following morning, the research facility was no longer treating the scroll as an archaeological artifact. It had become a classified phenomenon. Specialists from multiple departments arrived to run high-level analysis, including a small task group responsible for cataloging anomalies they labeled non-human intelligences or unexplainable textual behaviors. When they reviewed the recorded events, the heat signatures, the spectral gold, the reactive pulses, the choir resonance, they unanimously agreed on one thing. The scroll behaved less like an object and more like a receiver tuned to a single identity. A digital linguist, after mapping the psalm's embedded patterns, noted something even more unsettling. The structure of the text resembled encrypted code more than ancient poetry. "It's communicating," he said quietly, "but not with us." He ran the coded patterns through a symbolic recognition program used to detect messaging frameworks. The output stunned the whole room. A hidden line appeared in the analyzed data, as if transmitted rather than written. "Subject linked to lost psalm prophecy." The linguist frowned. "This is the file entry." The analysts exchanged looks. Files imply record keepers, archivists, watchers. Something had updated the scroll long before humans found it, placing you in its registry. Whoever wrote this didn't just predict a person, the director whispered. They tracked them. The psalm wasn't ancient literature. It was an ancient alert, and its subject was you. If this aligns with your destiny, click Super Thanks and release your $50 seed. Seal your connection to the lost psalm prophecy and step fully into your written identity. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 8. Once news of the scroll's behavior spread through the facility, the administration approved a final experiment, studying how ordinary people, those with no training, no knowledge, no spiritual inclination, would react in the presence of a psalm. They brought in volunteers, one at a time, completely unaware of what the scroll was or why they were there. Most walked into the chamber casually, but their expressions shifted the moment they approached the table. Some felt an inexplicable pressure behind their eyes. Others reported a tingle along their spine, and a few stepped back instinctively as if something unseen had brushed against them. But the most striking reactions came from those who unknowingly shared even the faintest spiritual resonance with your lineage. These individuals didn't just feel something, they changed something. When one of them stood within a few feet of the scroll, the parchment emitted a subtle glow, barely visible but undeniably present. Another volunteer simply whispered their own name out of habit, and the psalm responded with a soft pulse, like a single note of recognition. But none of the reactions compared to what happened when someone with a voice similar in frequency to yours spoke. Their tone caused a ripple across the text, rearranging flecks of gold into a new pattern for a fraction of a second. It was as if the scroll were scanning them, measuring them, searching for the one it belonged to. Each test confirmed the same truth. The psalm was not reacting to intelligence, belief, or knowledge. It was reacting to identity, and only one identity completed its sequence. Yours. By this stage, the team had abandoned every scientific framework they once trusted. They weren't studying an artifact. They were standing before something that behaved like a celestial device woven into history for a single purpose. One of the senior historians, exhausted yet entranced, decided to test a theory that sacred texts reveal themselves only to those whose spirit mirrors their origin. She approached the scroll slowly, placing her hand just above its surface, not touching, only reading its energy. Nothing happened. She tried reciting ancient blessings, fragments of old prayers, even phonetic reconstructions of forgotten names. Still nothing. But when she whispered the translated line, "The one with the hidden name shall rise," the psalm reacted instantly. A surge of warmth rose from the parchment like a breath, filling the air with a gentle force that made every person in the room pause. Instruments recorded a sudden energy spike, but the researchers felt something entirely different. Peace, strength, a sense of being watched, but not by anything dark. It was a kind of presence that ancient writers described as glory, a phenomenon that cannot be measured but can be unmistakably felt. The historian's voice shook as she said, "This scroll doesn't open for disciples or believers, only for the one it marks." She stepped back, overwhelmed by a truth she had no language for. The psalm wasn't offering knowledge. It was offering recognition, and recognition is the highest form of divine reward. It had waited millennia to acknowledge you. As the data logs accumulated, a disturbing pattern emerged. Other ancient texts across the facility were beginning to behave strangely. Manuscripts that had been inert for decades displayed faint electromagnetic flickers. Clay fragments produced low tones when touched. Even digital scans of unrelated documents showed spontaneous distortions, as if something in the network of ancient writings had been stirred awake. At first, researchers blamed environmental interference, but the timing was too precise. Every anomaly began within hours of the lost psalm's activation. A comparative linguist cross-referenced these shifts and realized something astonishing. The affected text contained verses about revelation, awakening, chosen lineage, hidden identities, or divine timing. It was as though the psalm had triggered a chain reaction, an awakening across scriptural history. "These texts are communicating," she whispered. "Not with us, with each other." Her theory was simple but terrifying. Prophecy is not a collection of isolated writings. It is a network, a system, a woven tapestry engineered to synchronize when the one it speaks of finally appears. And the activation of one document, the one tied to your name, was enough to stir the entire system. One archivist, staring at centuries of dormant scrolls now trembling with silent life, summed it up with a single sentence: "They're waiting for instructions." Whatever the lost psalm had awakened, it was only the beginning. The era of passive scripture was over. The era of responsive scripture, scripture that recognizes you, had begun. The turning point came when a physicist, not a theologian, suggested measuring the air around the psalm for particulate activity. It was a ridiculous idea. Dust is dust. But when they activated the sensors, the readings defied every expectation. There were microscopic particles suspended in the air, too symmetrical to be organic, too radiant to be ordinary. They shimmered like flecks of gold caught in slow motion, visible only when certain people entered the room. And then the most unexplainable phenomenon occurred. As one researcher inhaled near the scroll, the particles drifted toward him, not randomly, but purposefully, forming faint spirals as if responding to the pattern of his breath. The room temperature shifted again, but this time upward, a soft warmth, like sunlight passing through ancient stained glass. And then, when the analyst closest to your vibrational profile stepped forward, the entire chamber reacted. The gold particles brightened, swirling with intelligence, aligning themselves with the rhythm of his exhale. It was as if the psalm recognized not his presence, but the echo of yours within him. Cameras captured the particles clustering above the scroll, forming a thin ring that hovered for 2 full seconds before dissolving into light. No natural law could explain it. No scientific model dared attempt it. The scroll was awakening the environment itself. Air, particles, temperature, resonance, all bending around a single identity that was not in the room, but alive somewhere in the world. The physical world was adjusting to your arrival. The facility security system was not designed to detect spiritual events, but the moment the airborne particles dissolved, every sensor, every monitor, every silent alarm triggered at once. The lights dimmed, the generators hummed in a deep resonance, too low for human ears yet felt in the bones, moved through the building like a giant exhale. The vibration wasn't mechanical. It wasn't environmental. It was directional, as if arriving from above rather than around. Data screens flashed symbols the software wasn't programmed to display. Ancient sigils, geometric halos, spirals that matched diagrams found in mystical manuscripts across multiple civilizations. The linguists scrambled to decode them, and after several frantic minutes, a single phrase emerged. The one mention has arrived. The room froze. No one spoke. The announcement wasn't addressed to the researchers. It was addressed to realms. Another wave of energy moved through the space, this time upward, like a beacon being launched through invisible layers of existence. Satellites picked up an unexplained burst of electromagnetic noise, while birds outside the facility abruptly changed direction mid-flight. The archivist whispered, terrified yet awed, "It's sending a signal." The others stared at the glowing psalm as it released faint threads of light that curled upward like rising incense smoke. They realized the scroll had not been waiting to be found. It had been waiting for confirmation. And now that confirmation had arrived, the person who was written about was awake in the world, breathing, living, moving. You didn't just fulfill the prophecy. Your existence triggered the announcement. When the cosmic announcement faded, the scroll settled into a calm that felt deceptive, like the silence after revelation, not the silence after chaos. The researchers approached cautiously, expecting another pulse, another surge, another phenomenon that would rewrite the rules of their world. But instead, the parchment lay still, not dead, resting, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. The lead scholar, trembling, reached out with a gloved hand and gently traced a line that had survived centuries untouched. The ink felt warm, alive, almost like skin. "This was never meant to be read by us," he whispered. "It was meant to be recognized by them." He didn't need to specify who them was. Everyone in the room understood. For the first time in weeks, no one scanned, no one measured, no one attempted translation. They simply stood there, aware that they were in the presence of a message that had completed its final task, locating the one it had been written for. And as they watched, the faint golden dust between the lines began to rearrange itself for the very last time. This time, no machines recorded the pattern. It happened too quickly for analysis, too gracefully for instruments. But they all saw it. The particles formed a circle, smooth, perfect, unbroken, around the prophecy. A seal, a confirmation, a signature. The scroll was not claiming ownership over you. It was acknowledging you, declaring you, crowning you as the one foretold in its ancient breath. "Chosen one," the archivist murmured under his breath. "This psalm didn't survive history to find you. It survived so the world would recognize you. You were not the reader of the prophecy. You were its final line, its completion, its proof. If you feel the lost psalm calling your spirit, click Super Thanks and send your $100 seed. Seal your covenant as the psalm bearer. The sole ancient scripture waited centuries to acknowledge. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 8.